Hello everybody out there, how are you doing? My name is Rob, welcome back to Rule of Two Review, and let's talk about this crazy director shakeup and all this drama with Star Wars Episode 9. So I have to say, I'm really glad that in my last video discussing the departure of Colin Trevorrow from Episode 9 and all of the drama that we know played out just over the past few days, that I brought up in that video the fact that, it might not be too terribly long until we actually see the official director of Episode 9 announced by Lucasfilm. So I didn't necessarily want to make a separate video detailing which directors we might see. I knew I wouldn't be able to get it up in time. I was late to that news anyway. And lo and behold, here we are today, and we now know who will officially be directing Episode 9. You obviously know who this person is. It is J.J. Abrams. So yes, JJ is back. Holy freaking cow. JJ is back. I seriously never thought that we would actually be saying that. But that's the deal. Them's the details, folks. Them's the beef. We officially have J.J. Abrams returning for his second Star Wars movie in this brand new sequel trilogy. The first handful of movies made post-George Lucas, post-retiring in this new Kathleen Kennedy Disney regime era of Star Wars. And it's wild news. It's really, really wild news, and I've been going through a crazy roller coaster of emotions about it today. Initial thoughts, once I woke up and saw this on my Twitter feed and started thinking about it, reacting to it, and seeing the whole world reacting to this, I was like, I kind of facepalmed. I was like, man, I love JJ overall as a creative type. I've said it many times. I think Force Awakens is a very, very, very good non-Lucas Star Wars movie. I really love that movie despite its flaws. But as I said in my video about the Trevorrow thing, I didn't really want JJ to come back because I feel like there's so much about the spirit and soul and heart of Star Wars underneath the superfluous surface level stuff of the weird, certain kinds of special effects and dialogues and all these things, and just things he did well, but that don't feel like the actual soul of Star Wars. I feel like he doesn't necessarily get that. There's something about the heartbeat of what makes the story and the saga so great that obviously the creator George Lucas understood, that I just didn't know that he could really bring back into the fold. I was willing to accept the simple, safe, retread film he made with The Force Awakens, knowing that we were going to hopefully get a much, much better 8 and 9, that we're going to continue the story he set up. I was totally cool with letting that play out. So the idea of him coming back to do 9 and finish this trilogy and essentially the last film in the 9 arc saga, I never really liked the idea of that. So seeing that J.J. Abrams was going to be the guy this morning, I was like, oh man, it's not horrible, but no, I just didn't want J.J. to do this film. Now, that being said, even though all of my criticisms and everything that I said about JJ and what he did with Force Awakens and what he understands about Star Wars and doesn't understand, I feel does hold true, at least in my opinion. I still feel that way. That being said, the more I thought about this, and I mean, this probably took less than an hour after I learned the news. The more I thought about it, played out the events, considered what we know Rian Johnson, at least what we expect to know about what Rian Johnson is doing with The Last Jedi, and imagining JJ picking up the pieces from what he did and then what Rian Johnson did and what we know Episode 9 has to be, I started to realize, it actually might make a lot more sense than I initially thought. I feel like in a lot of ways, even though I still think, as far as the individual people, that there are quite a few better people, I think, to have taken up Episode 9, I think that this actually has become a really, really smart and wise choice. And the main thing that I gravitate to as a fan, and the things that I think about and care about in terms of Star Wars and the story and the characters, and where I hope to see this new sequel trilogy go, is I'm somebody who has always loved George Lucas and his approach to the films and how he's made the first 2 trilogies, and those are his movies, his story, and this is still kind of supposed to be part of that same story. Obviously, it's got the same characters in it. And I always loved the fact, what impressed me about Star Wars and what he did with it, through the ups and downs, I love all the movies, but through the ups and downs, is the fact that it is one person's vision, one man, one creative type, one storyteller's vision, and it was 100% true to that person, the person who gifted it to us, who made us all fall in love with it in the first place. I know some people like these movies and don't like these movies and whatever. It was still this person's vision, and so even the worst of it, which I don't really think there's worst, but even the worst of it still felt genuine and sincere, and you could tell that the person involved intimately cared about and believed in everything that was going into every movie. And I think that that can be attributed to the one vision of one person. even though some directors took some of the films in the original trilogy. So when I think about this new trilogy, one of the things I was hoping would happen before we even had The Force Awakens was that one person would take over. Kathleen Kennedy's George Lucas's friend. She's the one who, worked with him throughout all their careers. She's the one who he trusted with Lucasfilm. She would probably have understood how that is the best way to tell a Star Wars trilogy, a Star Wars episodic saga. And so I was hoping we were going to see one person, even if it was JJ at the time, be the one person to tell the whole story. Then we learned they were splitting it up and different people were taking different parts of the stories in different films, and we learned that they didn't plan out, and plot the whole of the trilogy through 7, 8, and 9 through the end and all these different things. And I was like, well, I mean, it could still be really great, but I just kind of wish they didn't do that. I wish they stuck to one vision, or that they at least plotted out the story beats of all 3 films. And now that we have JJ directing Episode 7, Rian Johnson directing 8, and now whatever's going to happen with JJ directing Episode 9 again, it's like, well, what I have to appreciate is that we have less hands in the pot. We have less filmmakers dipping their creative toes into this sequel trilogy, and I have to admit that excites me. I'm not sure if that makes sense. It might sound a little bit like my brain is all over the place with this and I might not be explaining it well, but it really just comes down to the fact that I think less people's visions going into creating this trilogy, the better. Because that's, again, as I was saying, how it worked with all the previous films, and I like the idea that it's continuing still. Even though we do have this weird thing where we've got this trilogy with a director directing the first and last film, and we've got this weird one-off middle film directed by someone else. But something else that makes me realize that this could also still be a good thing is you have to think that, especially if The Last Jedi turns out to be as good as we all want and as good as we all expect, that with any luck, Rian Johnson and JJ might actually work fairly close on this film, at least with setting up the story beats and story elements. You have to think JJ and Rian, especially now that the deal has been done, or for however long that Lucasfilm has known JJ was going to be the guy, that JJ and Rian Johnson have had many meetings. They're probably still having meetings. They're discussing, okay, well, this happened in Force Awakens with your vision, and then, I did these things in Episode 8 with my vision. What are some of the natural places for where everything is going to end with Episode 8 to go in a future film, in what will become JJ's Episode 9? So, even though Rian Johnson, as of right now, isn't actually credited or acknowledged as somebody working on the story or the film with JJ, you have to imagine that that's how these kinds of people, especially with the Star Wars trilogy, are going to work together. Now, on this note, let's talk about the other person who is writing this film with JJ, because, as I didn't mention, JJ is directing and writing this movie, which is a negative, but also still a positive, because, again, it keeps it all closely knit, and the less people's visions, the better, like I said. But the other person writing this film with JJ, as of right now, is Chris Terrio. Chris Terrio is most recently known for Batman vs. Superman, which is obviously very divisive. I thought the movie was okay, better with the Ultimate Edition on Blu-ray. I actually like that version quite a bit. But divisive and probably not as good as that movie, definitely not as good as that movie should have been, conceptually. Batman fighting Superman on film should have been the best movie ever, and it turned out to be just okay, for the most part. But he also won an Oscar for writing Argo, which is an amazing film and an incredible script. So the guy has some chops. He's also writing Justice League, which comes out later this year, and I think that looks great. I want to believe that movie is going to be very good. You never know, but right now my hopes are high for that. So we've got JJ, who's already worked on a Star Wars film, grew up loving Star Wars, and, mimicked a lot of what George Lucas did in his early years. And then we have Chris Terrio, who's written some interesting films in his past, we'll say. They're writing the script, JJ is directing it, and it really falls back on everything I've already discussed. I feel like what Lucasfilm and Kathleen Kennedy decided to do in the midst of, the fourth director filmmaking script writing turmoil in a row, decided to just play it really safe. And at the end of the day, even though I think taking risks is good, and I think that George Lucas's risk, for example, and how he made The Phantom Menace, the first Star Wars film in almost 20 years at the time, that was definitely not a safe film that had a very complicated plot, but yet a very kid-like vibe. That's why I think that movie is a better film than The Force Awakens. It's a better Star Wars film, I should say, than The Force Awakens, is because of the risks he took. And I would like to see risks in this new trilogy, but at the same time, the way things have been happening behind the scenes with Lucasfilm and making these movies, I actually like the safe choice here. Because you know what? I don't want this trilogy to fall apart. I don't want it to be bad. I mean, I'm so tragically sad as a fan that George Lucas is no longer involved. I bring him up in every Star Wars video because I freaking love the guy. Ask anyone I know, I will talk about George Lucas and praise him as much as I can, even though he's not perfect. I will never say he's perfect, and all of his movies are not perfect, but I still love the way he makes a Star Wars movie and the way he tells a Star Wars story. And now that we're in the era without him, and we have this trilogy playing out without him, as a fan, I don't want to see this trilogy be bad. I don't want to see it be the trilogy that I don't want to think about or watch. I want to be able to have a 9-film marathon for the rest of time. Episodes 1 through 9, bring it on. I don't care the order we create, as long as you got all 9 films that are of good equal quality, which I think they are so far, and willing to watch in one sitting or however you do it. That's what I want. So I have to say that making a safe choice with JJ, somebody who's already started the story, is picking up his own pieces, picking up where Rian Johnson is leaving off with what we hope will be an excellent The Last Jedi movie. I feel like the safe choice is actually the smarter way to go here. So yeah, those are my very impassioned and emotional thoughts. There is nothing more important to me in this life, you guys, than Star Wars. And seeing this stuff happen, it's been crazy, you know. My girlfriend and I attended Star Wars Celebration earlier this year, and it was such a great way to be welcomed into the community and the feeling of Star Wars in person. I got to meet the man, Hayden Christensen. That picture, oh, it is up there. I thought I took it down, but there it is right back there. You know, I got to meet Hayden Christensen, which was great, and so I'm just feeling the Star Wars goodness so much right now. And when all this stuff started to happen, it got really, really kind of scary. And seeing this happen with Episode 9, even though, like I said, I think there are better filmmakers to make a Star Wars film than JJ, at the end of the day, and I would have liked Rian Johnson, as I discussed. I think Rian Johnson would have been a better choice. But that being said, I think JJ, surprisingly, now that I've thought about it for a couple of hours, turns out to be a pretty good choice. At least, so we'll see. Once we see The Last Jedi, and once we see Episode 9, the something, 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 whatever that turns out to be in a couple of years. So, and the movie was delayed to December 2019. I forgot to bring that up in this video. I won't waste your time blabbing into your faces anymore, but the film got delayed from May to December. Also, I think a smart move, but like I said, I'm not going to talk anymore about that. So yeah, what do you guys think about this? JJ coming back for Episode 9. I was nervous and wary at first, but now I've settled into it, and I'm ready to accept it, and I think it's going to turn out for the better for the entirety of this new sequel trilogy. Discuss Star Wars Episode 9, JJ, Rian Johnson, George Lucas, all these great things below. Thanks, of course, as always, for tuning in, guys. This is Rob of Rule of Two Review, and I will catch you next time on another Star Wars video.